As I stand up here today, I'm wearing a lot of different hats. I'm wearing the hat of the union president. I currently serve as the union president, but more importantly, I'm wearing the hat of a father of two amazingly unique and talented children who are here tonight. I'm also the husband of a loving and supporting wife, and I'm a teacher of 17 years with a passion for sparking the imagination of my students. I also wear the hat of an overburdened taxpayer and an angry citizen. You know, first, before I get to all the negative stuff, I just want to first focus on the positive and offer a special thank you to all the members of the Ellenville Teachers and School-Related Professionals Association, all the members of the community, and especially to the students that were inspired to take part in the political process this year. Our faxes, our phone calls, our rally attendance, our meetings with legislators, and our undying passion for locally controlled public education has helped to push back the governor's negative agenda. We also have to thank our state representatives who've stood up for public education, our public schools, and our kids by voting no to the governor's misguided budget priorities. And I also want to say thank you to our superintendent and Board of Education for reinvesting what money we did receive back from Albany into the people and programs that serve our children. And even though we've had a portion of the money Albany owes us returned, we're still losing valued teachers and support staff that provide much needed services to our students. And that's on top of the many programs and services we've already lost over the past several years. Our class sizes are going to increase. Resources for our students are going to decrease. And another year is going to usher in a new, even more convoluted and bogus evaluation system which relies heavily on corporate-created tests. We aren't losing these valuable members of our school community because enrollment is significantly lower or because they're doing a poor job and they have to move on. We're losing them because the plan by some in Albany seems to be to slowly deprive our schools of needed resources until we become either fiscally or academically insolvent, and their plan is in full motion. We've been forced here. We've been forced into a battle for our public schools, and we've been forced into a battle for our children and for their right to attend their public school each and every day with the #1 learning standard being that of inspired engagement in the learning process, something that's not currently in the standards. Our children have the right to become artists, philosophers, tradespeople, or business owners. There are limitless possibilities for our children with education, and they go way beyond being labeled as a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Our children have a right to expect the people in charge of their schools are going to be thoughtful of and respectful to their individual needs. The people waging the current battle against our schools do not take the individual dreams and aspirations of our children seriously. Governor Cuomo and a small group of corporate privatization zealots are trying desperately to take over our public schools. They view our public schools and our children the same way they view most things in their lives, and that's through the scope of profit potential. They're willing to demonize the teachers of the state instead of offering support. They're convinced that local citizens, us, everybody here in this room, that we are not capable of making decisions about what is right for our children and our schools and our communities. Well, and worst of all, they're willing to sacrifice our children's passion for learning in order to generate questionable data to be bought and sold like other commodities. Our children are learning, and their learning are not commodities to be traded like precious metals or pork bellies. Big business cannot put a stock price on our schools, and we will not allow them to treat our children as commodities. With almost no exceptions, everyone wants to see our public school children succeed in life. Everyone knows that the best opportunity to raise oneself up is through education. And one of the greatest predictors of academic success is socioeconomic background. Students in poverty are at greatest risk of academic failure when compared to their more affluent peers. And here in Ellenville, we have over 60% of our students in the free and reduced lunch program because they need to be. Ellenville has an unemployment rate of over 18%. So if the governor and his billionaire backers would like to improve education in Ellenville and in New York State, I would urge them to take heed of the current research that suggests we address the issue of poverty. But allocating more resources to children in need is probably not that profitable, so it won't happen. The Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, makes the following recommendations to mitigate the effects of poverty on student achievement. Number one, provide a specialized curriculum or additional instructional resources for students based on academic needs. That makes sense to everybody in this room, but that's not part of the governor's plan. Number two, target disadvantaged students through additional instructional resources or economic assistance. Our governor and his backers have been removing our children's resources, and economic assistance is not being offered. Number three, the allocation of resources across schools is associated with the equity and opportunities. So, it's another way of saying our students here in Ellenville do not have the same opportunities as students in more affluent districts, and it's not fair. Poverty is a massive obstacle to many of our students' success. The state has had a plan on the books, though, to compensate for this in the form of foundation aid. Our foundation aid from the state helped to equalize the funding in districts like ours with a high poverty rate. But our foundation aid has been diminished to help the governor create a huge budget surplus. He calls it a budget surplus. I call it stealing. It's not a surplus. It was money that was stolen from our public schools when they put in the gap elimination adjustment and then when they reduced our foundation aid. That money is owed us, and we need it. Our children need it back. If we want to neutralize the negative effects of poverty on our students' academic performance, we have to get the folks in Albany to fully restore our foundation aid. Our governor and his corporate masters have used political doublespeak to try and deceive us into thinking that they're doing what's best for our children. We know better after seeing their plans in action. At first, the rhetoric from the governor and his privatization allies sounded good. We need to improve our schools and raise our standards was the battle cry. And who can argue with that? It sounds good, and I think everybody agrees with it. But the devil is in the details. And as is the case with so much in politics, the rhetoric we were being fed doesn't match the political agenda of those spewing the rhetoric. How can the governor say he's an advocate for children when he hasn't spent almost any time in public schools? He hasn't asked our students, he hasn't asked our superintendent, he hasn't asked our administrators or community members, what do you need? What can I do? How can I help? How can I make the learning experience more fulfilling here for you? Those questions were never asked. And during the original rollout of the governor's assassination on public education, they had former Commissioner King go on a Common Core promotion tour until they didn't like what they were hearing from the public. Meeting after meeting was attended by concerned parents, students, teachers, and community members. And at meeting after meeting, the commissioner heard the public's dissatisfaction with the plan. The public demanded that the state modify the Common Core rollout to inject some common sense. But once again, the commissioner and the governor did not listen to us. The governor and his friends didn't listen to the educational practitioners. They didn't listen to the parents and students. They didn't listen to the research about what's developmentally appropriate for our children. The governor didn't listen when only 28% of New Yorkers agreed with his education policies. The governor isn't listening to one of the best companies to work for in America, namely Google. According to a February 22nd, 2014 New York Times article, Google's senior vice president of people operations stated that GPAs are worthless as criteria for hiring, and test scores are worthless. We found that they don't predict anything. So if one of the most innovative, cutting-edge companies on the planet doesn't think test scores are all that important, why isn't the governor and his backers listening? The governor didn't even listen to his own father, who said in his book, Reason to Believe, when he said, we need smaller class sizes. This was the late Mario Cuomo. Compared to their counterparts at private institutions, teachers in our public schools are asked to handle up to twice as many students at a time. Apparently, the late Governor Mario Cuomo knew that class size does indeed matter, and it does contribute to student success. The late Governor Mario Cuomo also said in his book, American public education is really composed of two systems. An excellent one that serves the children of the already comfortable, and a wretched one that barely serves the rest. We need to especially repair our schools' physical facilities, And I guess Mario Cuomo understood that it does indeed take adequate funding to have adequately functioning schools. So who is the governor listening to? We need to follow the money. Our governor has received nearly $5 million in campaign contributions from the same ridiculously wealthy hedge fund managers that want to turn our public schools into their own for-profit institutions. And that was crystal clear when Governor Cuomo appointed Richard Parsons to chair the new New York Education Reform Commission back in 2012. Richard Parsons, that's the type of person that Cuomo's listening to about education decisions. So who is Richard Parsons? Is he a longtime parent advocate for children? No. Is he an expert on teaching and learning? Absolutely not. He actually dropped out of high school with a C average and went on to earn his GED. And from there, Richard Parsons moved up the corporate ladder, and he was the former head of Citigroup, among other executive failings, who, during the recent financial meltdown, received money from the public in the form of a bank bailout. Mr. Parsons, during that financial crisis, made sure his top executives were handsomely rewarded, even though Citigroup's stock went down nearly 44% by April of 2012. Parsons even gave one of these top executives a $53 million compensation package while raking in the money from us taxpayers. He eventually had to step down because he was sued by shareholders for his colossal failures and scandals. So what happens to someone that ends up with something like that on their resume? They get handpicked by our governor to head up the New York State Reform on Education Committee, okay? This makes no sense to you and I, but then again, this is a governor that doesn't think that we have the ability to know what's right for our schools and our community. And the governor must have instantly recognized Mr. Parsons' talent and said, this is the man we need, this is the person we need. He obviously has experience in taking massive amounts of public money, using it to line his pockets and those of his friends, all the while sticking us with the bill. This is their plan for public education. And one of the main tools the profiteers want to use to demoralize our teaching professionals is the testing and evaluation scheme they have recently imposed. They would like to take away resources while at the same time increasing the learning objectives above and beyond what's developmentally appropriate for most of our children. The schools are being set up to fail, and our children are being sabotaged to fulfill this political agenda. Again, our children are not numbers, and they are not a commodity. Nobody ever invented a new product by filling in bubble sheets. The choices in life and our relationships aren't as simple as A, B, C, D, or none of the above. Poets and artists have had time in the past to use the creative process to make great masterpieces for us to admire. That's nowhere in the standards. Nobody's ever been inspired by a learning standard. Has anyone ever heard a valedictorian speech where the valedictorian thanked standard 6.R.-3-4 for inspiring her to pursue a career in medicine? It's never happened. Does our governor understand that college and career ready means so much more than only math or ELA to our children? Are we willing to trade the unique genius of an entire generation of public school students for the sake of uniformity and corporate profiteers in our schools? I think the vast majority of us would answer no to that. We are in a crisis. The line has been drawn in the sand, and we have to decide where we stand. We also have to be clear about what we stand for, because our children are watching. Our children will learn so much more from the actions we take or don't take than anything we could say or have them read or any bubble sheet we could have them fill in. And on the local level, we have to work together to deal with the situation that we've been dealt. I would ask that our board take a stand against the governor's agenda and in the form of passing a resolution to condemn the over-testing of our students, just as many other local boards have done. I'd also ask our board to participate more in the local lobbying efforts to help support a more rational type of reform. John F. Kennedy said in one of his speeches once that the most inhospitable places in hell will be reserved for those who in a time of crisis choose neutrality. Let's choose action, not neutrality. Our board also needs to look more closely at our budget allocations. I've heard it said that a budget is a moral document, and it shows what our priorities are. I've seen enough here to know that we are spending too much money on per diem administrators, and that the board did not need to increase 2 of the vice principal positions to 12 months. The Ellenville Teachers and School-Related Professionals Association has also had the opportunity to look at our most recent bus count numbers, and I'm asking the board to please look and see if we can consolidate more bus runs, as it appears the numbers would support this, and maybe we could reallocate those funds back to the classroom. Please prioritize our budget in a way to give maximum support to our academic programs in the coming years. I sincerely hope that our board will do whatever it takes as the leadership in our district to protect our children from the privatization profiteers. As parents and community members, we don't have the money or the lobbyists on our side. We don't have the powerful political connections that go back for generations. But when it comes to our children and our public schools, we have the most to lose. And once it's gone, we may never get it back. And maybe, when all is said and done, maybe, the profiteers will have prevailed because the chips are stacked against us. The obstacles we have to overcome to preserve what is right for our children may prove to be too much, even for the most committed among us. Maybe. How can we possibly overcome all the obstacles presented to us? We have to use what power we do have as parents and community members. A good start would be to reject the testing and punishment scheme designed and being forced on our children. My family and I have taken the step and made the decision to refuse the state exams this year, just as thousands of other families across the state have decided to do. When the politicians all over the state see that thousands of parents and students, like my family, have decided to send back the tests marked refused, they will listen. They will listen then. They will understand that every refused test is a vote against the governor's reforms, and that the refusals will also translate into no votes for any legislator that continues to bend to the governor's will. Lastly, and very importantly, there's one lesson I need to offer to my children as their father, to my students as their teacher, and to my colleagues as their union leader. And I'm proud of all those roles. And it's that we must never give in to any power that we know is corrupt. Never. And we must always fight for what our heads and our hearts tell us is right against whatever the odds are. And we must never, ever, under any circumstances, give up. Thank you.